My sister kicked me out when I was pregnant, and to make things worse, my parents sided with her. So, I stopped paying their mortgage. Let me explain. I'm a 33-year-old woman raising my wonderful 5-year-old daughter by myself. Life hasn't been easy, especially because things with her father didn't work out. While I was pregnant, and even after our daughter was born, he was unfaithful to me. It hurt deeply, but after she came into my life, I knew I had to take charge. I ended the relationship and told him to leave. That's a story for another time. Right now, I want to talk about my family, specifically my sister, Ava. After the breakup, I moved back in with my parents. Being a single mom is tough, and having family around for support seemed like the right thing to do. For a while, things were manageable. I worked, and my parents helped out occasionally, although not as much as they had initially promised. But everything changed a few days ago. I came home to find my younger sister, Ava, sitting in the living room. She's 29, and the first thing I noticed was her huge pregnant belly. Ava had moved to Croatia with her husband right after they got married, and I hadn't seen her since. You'd think I'd be happy to see her, but it's complicated. Ava and I have never gotten along. She's always acted superior to me and made it her mission to turn our parents against me whenever she could. Being the younger sibling, she played the innocent card perfectly, getting away with almost everything. Ava wasn't just mean with her words. She was physically intimidating, too. She's bigger and stronger than me, and there were times growing up when I genuinely felt threatened. Whenever I tried to tell our parents about her bullying, or even when she got physical, they'd brush it off saying, "She's your little sister. How could she hurt you?" That's how it's always been. I learned to keep my distance from Ava, and moving out for high school felt like escaping a prison. But now she's back, and not just for a visit. She's back for good. When I saw her sitting there, I was stunned. I cautiously asked my mom how long Ava planned to stay. Before my mom could answer, Ava shouted from the living room, "I'm here to stay. Do you have a problem with that?" Her tone was sharp and confrontational. Clearly, she hadn't changed one bit. My mom explained that Ava's husband had been transferred back to the States. Although he had company accommodation, they decided it was best for Ava to stay with our parents during her pregnancy and after the baby was born. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. When I had my daughter, I didn't get half the support Ava was now receiving. I asked my mom if she really had the time to take care of Ava's child. She replied weakly, "Well, she's still so young. How could she raise a child on her own?" Young? Ava is 29. I was 27 when I had my daughter and managed most of the postpartum challenges on my own because my husband wasn't around. My mom didn't come to help me then, saying it was something I needed to figure out as part of motherhood. But now, she was bending over backward for Ava, cooking for her, bringing her supplements, and ensuring she was comfortable. I was furious but stayed calm. The favoritism had always been obvious, but this was a whole new level. For years, I kept my distance from Ava because of this, and now, here we were, living under the same roof again. This time, though, it wasn't just me. I had my daughter to think about. When I separated from my husband, I initially rented my own place, but my dad insisted I move in with them, saying their house was too big for just the two of them and that they could help with my daughter while I worked. It seemed like a fair deal. Paying rent to my parents instead of an outside landlord would save money and provide support. But now, I was going through a lot emotionally at the time. Pregnancy, postpartum challenges, and my husband's infidelity. So, I accepted my parents' offer to move in. At first, things were manageable. I paid rent, and my mom agreed to babysit my daughter occasionally. However, it wasn't as often as she had promised. Most of the time, I had to hire a full-time nanny because my mom said she couldn't babysit full-time. Instead, she took on the role of a baby monitor, making sure the nanny was doing her job properly. It wasn't an ideal arrangement, but I was grateful to have her around to keep an eye on things. But now, seeing how she was catering to Ava, Doing everything for her while I had to hire help and handle everything on my own during my pregnancy was too much to bear. My mom had barely visited me when I was pregnant, but for Ava, she was practically her personal nurse. I started to feel like something was off. My parents had agreed to let Ava move in permanently, and I couldn't shake the feeling that they were planning something. Our house wasn't big enough to accommodate everyone comfortably, but I couldn't just move out on a whim. I was paying rent and relied on my parents to help keep an eye on my daughter, even if they weren't always the most reliable. I wasn't ready to leave her with a nanny full time, especially without the safety net of having family nearby. Then my worst fears came true. A few days after Ava moved in, I came home from work exhausted, but eager to spend time with my daughter. As soon as I pulled into the driveway, something felt off. My heart sank when I saw my belongings, suitcases, boxes, and bags, piled on the front porch. Sitting on the steps next to the pile was my daughter, hugging her knees, looking small and scared as she waited for me. I rushed over, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's going on, sweetie?" I asked, pulling her into a tight hug. My heart ached as I felt her trembling in my arms. She didn't say much, but her fear was clear. I stroked her hair and helped her stand, my anger and disbelief boiling inside me. Grabbing our belongings, I marched into the house, determined to get answers. As I opened the door, there was Ava, sprawled out on the couch with a smug grin on her face, eating like nothing had happened. My mom was in the kitchen, pretending she hadn't noticed a thing, and my dad sat in his armchair glued to the TV, as if my daughter and I didn't exist. "What is this?" I demanded, my voice low but trembling with rage. "Why is my stuff outside?" Ava chuckled sarcastically, not even bothering to look up from her phone. "We needed more space. It's not like you're irreplaceable." My mom emerged from the kitchen, drying her hands on a dish towel. Her voice was colder than I'd ever heard before. "You always knew you couldn't stay here forever. Ava is pregnant and needs peace and space. You're an adult, sweetheart. You'll figure it out." It felt like a punch to the gut. I had been paying rent and helping around the house, and now they were tossing me out without so much as a warning. "You're kicking me out?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Me and my daughter? After everything I've done for you." "Ava needs support," my father muttered, not even glancing my way. Ava, of course, was loving every second of this. The smug look on her face made me sick. She had gotten exactly what she wanted. Me out of the picture, as if I were nothing more than a burden. I knew there was no point in arguing. They wouldn't listen to reason, and any plea for fairness would fall on deaf ears. I took my daughter's hand, gathered our belongings, and walked out of the house I once believed was a home. But I wasn't going to let this slide. In the following days, I contacted the bank and informed them I would no longer be paying the mortgage on my parents' house. The loan was in my name, and without my contributions, they were bound to face trouble. At the same time, I hired a lawyer to ensure they couldn't legally evict me without proper notice, adding another layer of complications for them. Meanwhile, I found a small apartment to rent. It wasn't much, but it was ours. For the first time in a long while, my daughter could sleep peacefully, free from the fear of being uprooted again. A few weeks later, the inevitable happened. My parents received notice that their house was going into foreclosure. My mom called me, her voice hysterical as she begged me to reconsider. "You're being cruel," she cried. "Ava can't handle this kind of stress during her pregnancy." I laughed bitterly, my chest heavy with all the pain they had caused. "Stress?" I snapped. "What about the stress you put me and my daughter through? Did that not matter?" There was silence on the other end of the line, as if she finally understood the weight of her actions. But it was too late. I was done. Ava tried to reach out too. Texts, calls, even messages through mutual contacts. But I ignored every attempt. They were simply reaping what they had sown. In the end, the house was sold, and my parents were forced to move into a cramped apartment in a less-than-ideal neighborhood. Ava and her husband had to fend for themselves, stripped of the luxury and support they had taken for granted. As for me, I moved forward. I found a better job, saved money, and built a new life for my daughter and me. It was just the two of us, and that was more than enough. Whenever someone from the family tried to guilt-trip me or ask for help, I would smile and say calmly, "You made your choices. Now live with them." Months passed, and with each day, the weight of the past faded as I rebuilt our lives. Our apartment wasn't big, but it was cozy, and most importantly, it was ours. My daughter thrived in a safe, loving environment, free from the tension my family had created. I found peace I never thought possible. The quiet was therapeutic, and the certainty that no one could humiliate me again gave me strength. Slowly but surely, I started to smile for real. I eventually found a new job that paid better and offered the flexibility I needed to care for my daughter. I saved up, and before long, we moved into a larger apartment in a quiet neighborhood with good schools nearby. For the first time in years, I felt hopeful about the future. Meanwhile, I couldn't avoid hearing about what had become of my parents and Ava. They were hitting rock bottom, and to be honest, I felt no pity. After losing their house, my parents moved into a modest apartment in a struggling neighborhood. My dad's pension barely covered their bills, and my mom had to take a job as a cashier to make ends meet. Her arrogance quickly faded when she realized survival wouldn't come easy. As for Ava, things were even worse. Without the luxury and support she had expected, she faced a harsh reality. Her husband, unable to handle the stress of being their sole provider, grew resentful. They fought constantly. A few months later, he walked out, leaving her alone to care for their baby. Unlike me, Ava didn't know how to be strong on her own. Instead of rising to the challenge, she drowned in self-pity, flooding social media with posts about how unfair life was and blaming everyone else for her problems. When my parents could no longer afford to support her, they turned to me. My mom called, her voice trembling with desperation. "Please, sweetheart," she pleaded. "Ava needs you. She's in such a bad place. You don't know what it's like to see your child suffer. She needs support now more than ever." I took a deep breath, feeling a mix of anger and satisfaction. Where was this compassion when I needed it? Where was this concern when you threw me and my daughter out? "No," I said calmly, my voice firm. "You made your choices. Now live with them." My mother sobbed, trying to appeal to family and forgiveness, but I hung up before she could finish. I had no space in my life for people who only cared when they were desperate. The calls stopped after that. Through distant relatives, I later heard that Ava ended up in a shelter with her baby. My parents were selling their furniture to pay off debts, burned bridges leaving them with no one to turn to. Meanwhile, I thrived. My job was going better than ever, and I was saving money while building a secure future for my daughter and me. I went back to school, pursued hobbies I had never had time for, and embraced every new opportunity. On weekends, my daughter and I explored parks, museums, and nearby towns. We didn't need much, just each other and the certainty that the worst was behind us. Seeing her eyes light up with happiness made me realize that every hardship had been worth it. In the end, I emerged stronger. I learned to value myself and to never settle for less than I deserve. Those who had tried to break me were now struggling, while I flourished. And me? I didn't offer them a single crumb of help. Not even a polite, "I'm sorry life is hard." Life has a funny way of paying people back, and I learned that the best revenge is living well. So, I moved forward. Each day was brighter and happier as I left the chaos behind.